Hi, thanks for joining me on the Listen and Grow podcast. I'm your host, Zach Randall-Freeman, and today is Tuesday, June the 2nd, 2026. Today is the second day of Pride Month, and there is no shortage of things to talk about. A trans teenager at the center of the biggest Supreme Court cases of our lifetime just did something extraordinary on the track. The D.C. Circuit handed the orange convicted felon a major legal loss on trans military service, and Pride Month's corporate sponsor collapse is worse than anyone really realized. And Philly is going big, and we're going to take a moment to honor Barney Frank. So we have 6 stories, and let's get into the first one. Becky Pepper Jackson wins state track title with Scoutus waiting. We are starting with a story that is remarkable, complicated, and important all at the same time. Becky Pepper Jackson is a 15-year-old transgender from Bridgeport, West Virginia. She is also the student at the center of the West Virginia versus PBJ, one of the most consequential Supreme Court cases affecting trans youth that we have seen in years. The case was argued before the justices back in January, and a ruling is expected any day now. The question before the court, whether state laws banning the transgender girls from competing on girls' school sports teams violate the Constitution and Title IX. While the nation waits for that ruling, Becky went to the West Virginia State Track and Field Championship this weekend, competing under a federal court injunction that allows her to participate while litigation plays out, and she won. She took first place in the girls' shot put. She finished 4th in the girls' discus, Class AAA state champion. West Virginia's Attorney General office immediately wrote to the Supreme Court to flag her results, arguing that Becky is not finishing near the back of the pack, as her attorneys had suggested during oral arguments. That letter was submitted to the court clerk on Tuesday. So here's the full picture. Becky has been taking puberty blockers since before puberty. She's identified as a girl since the 3rd grade. She's been competing with a court order protecting her right to participate, and she won a state title. The Supreme Court's eventual ruling in this case could affect the rights of trans students across 27 states that currently have sports bans in place. When that decision comes, and it's coming soon, we will cover it fully right here. For now, Becky Pepper Jackson is a state champion, and she deserves to be called just that. Our next story is trans military ban ruled unconstitutional by federal appeals court. This happened yesterday, June 1st. On the very first day of Pride, a federal appeals court ruled that the orange convicted felon's transgender military ban is likely unconstitutional. A 3-judge panel from the U.S. Court of Appeals for D.C. Circuit came down 2-1. The majority finding the ban drafted and implemented by the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth appears to be driven by what the courts called the bare desire to harm a politically unpopular group. Justice Judith Roger and Robert Wilkins concluded that the policy targeting transgender service members likely violates the Constitution's equal protection guarantee. They upheld a preliminary injunction blocking the Defense Department from removing current transgender troopers who are actively serving. The backstory is that the orange convicted felons signed an executive order in January 2025 claiming that transgender service members' gender identities conflict with, and this is the administration's own language, an honorable and truthful and disciplined lifestyle. Hegseth issued a policy that broadly disqualified anyone from gender dysphoria from service. Careers were ended. People who had been given years to this country were forced out. The Supreme Court had allowed the ban to remain in effect while lower courts worked through the challenges. Yesterday's ruling does not immediately end the ban, but it's a significant legal rebuke from the federal appeals court, and it keeps the injunction protecting the active duty plaintiffs in place. One dissenting judge sided with the administration. The case is not over, but today, day 2 of Pride Month, trans service members have a win. Next, the corporate pride pullback is real, and it's costing millions. Here is a story that deserves more attention than it's getting. Major pride celebrations across the country are heading into June significantly underfunded because corporations are quietly backing away from sponsorships, and the financial damage is serious. San Francisco Pride has lost somewhere between $200,000 and $350,000 in corporate sponsorships compared to last year. St. Louis Pride came in at $150,000 short of its prior year budget, roughly a third of its total. St. Pete in Florida is potentially looking at losing up to half of its event budget, New York City Pride has seen a steadily decline in sponsors since 2024. The reason, according to event organizers, corporations are afraid of being targeted by the Orange Convicted Felons Administration for their association with DEI initiatives. Dozens of companies, from Anheuser-Busch to Deloitte, have pulled back from LGBTQ+ sponsorships across the board, and some have ghosted longtime partners entirely. Susan Ford, the executive director of San Francisco Pride, put it plainly: "We will remember who stood by us and who didn't. When it was politically popular, they were lined up." That quote lands differently depending on how you feel about corporate pride, and that is a legitimate conversation. Many in our community have been long questioned whether corporate rainbow logos during June were even about genuine solidarity or just brand strategy. This moment is clarifying that question in real time. But here is what is also true. The community is responding. St. Louis Pride made up nearly all of its corporate shortfalls through individual donations. New York City Pride is seeing new partnerships, primarily from small queer-owned businesses, stepping into the gap that major brands left behind. And Pride is not dying because Anheuser-Busch walked. Pride is being rebuilt by the people it always actually is for. Next, India's new trans rights bill draws fierce criticism. So we are going international now, and this one is important. India has passed significant legislation earlier this year, the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Amendment Bill of 2026. It cleared both chambers of parliament in March and was signed by law by the president. On the surface, the name sounds like progress, but advocates and human rights organizations are raising serious alarms about what the bill actually does. The most controversial provision, mandatory medical examinations for transgender people seeking legal recognition of their gender identity. Critics say this completely undermines the principle of self-identification established by India's own Supreme Court in its landmark 2014 NALSA ruling, a ruling that affirmed the right of transgender people to declare their gender without requiring medical procedures or third-party gatekeeping. Human rights advocates are calling examinations requirement an invasion of privacy and a potential source of humiliation and harm. Several members of India's own National Council for Transgender Persons have publicly opposed the bill. Some have called the alleged draft was kept confidential and the council was never consulted during the legislative process. India has a large, visible, and historically significant transgender community, including the Harija community, and have been part of the South Asian culture for centuries. This question being raised by advocates right now is whether this bill, framed as protection, is actually functioning as a new barrier to legal recognition wrapped in the language of rights. As Pride Month begins and we celebrate how far Pride LGBTQ+ rights have come globally, it's worth being honest. This picture is still deeply uneven. Progress in one place does not protect against regression somewhere else. Next, we go to Barney Frank's memorial, a tribute worth pausing for. So I want to take a moment here because Barney Frank died on May 19th at 86 years old in his home in Algonquin, Maine, from complicated of congested heart failure. His husband Jim Reddy was with him. His memorial service is set for Monday, June 8th at Faneuil Hall in Boston. For those who may not have known Barney Frank's story, in 1987 he became the first member of Congress to voluntarily come out as gay. He represented Massachusetts in the House for 32 years. He helped secure AIDS funding at a time when the federal government was largely ignoring a crisis that was devastating our community. He fought unsuccessfully at the time to lift the ban on gay people serving in the military, and in 2012 he became the first sitting member of Congress to marry a same-sex partner when he married Jim Reddy. His memorial is during Pride Month, and his life lived openly and defiantly in an institution that was not ready for him is exactly what this month is all about. We honor Barney Frank, and we thank him, and we remember him. And next, we have Philly Pride 2026, which we are excited about because pride is power. So let's end on something that makes you want to show up. Philadelphia Pride 2026 is officially on. The organization Philly Pride 365 is returning this year under a banner that says exactly what it means. Pride is power. The full theme for celebration, this is what democracy looks like. The main parade, march, and festival is on Sunday, June 7th, and headlining the entertainment lineup is someone who is not just a Philadelphia icon, but a national treasure, Patti LaBelle. Born and raised in Philly, having her headline, "The city's pride celebration is homecoming," and the kind of moment that reminds us what pride at its best actually feels like. Local bars, restaurants, the Philly Pride Center, all of it's activated throughout the week, leading into and following the main event. The theme is "This is what democracy looks like," was chosen deliberately. The message from organizers, democracy's strongest when all people are visible, heard, and protected. In 2026, in a city that has always had a fierce, proud, deeply rooted LGBTQ+ community, this event is not just a celebration, it's a statement. Philly Pride, June 7th, Patti LaBelle, Pride is Power. If you are close enough, you should definitely attend. So that is your news for Tuesday, June 2nd, 2026. I apologize, I'm not in my studio again, so if you're watching this on video, I'm in an Airbnb and making the best of what I have. So I'm Zach Randall-Friedman. This is Listen Up Girl, your daily LGBTQ news podcast. Subscribe wherever you listen, follow us on Instagram and YouTube, and I'll see you tomorrow with more news. Thanks for listening.